Welcome to the OC Politics Show, keeping politics bipartisan, local, and on the level.
Welcome to the OC Politics Show. I'm Joe Matthews.
And I'm Todd DeVoe.
Oh, jazz hands, Todd. It's budget priorities. Woo! Pandemic-related impact on the Board of Supervisors and long-term mental health care. There's only so much money to go around. You know your soul through knowing your budgets, whether it's Board of Supervisors or the state capitol. The question is, who wins?
Who wins? By the way, Ron Lavelle, those jazz hands, it's for you, my friend. A good friend of mine who we had to do a lot of stuff like this, and budgets are always part of the things that we do. Budgets are terrible. What I mean by that is it's we're always looking at, even when in fat times, right? We're always looking at ways to cut the budget, and as people that are in government, we should be doing that, right? We should be looking at the best ways to be able to provide services at the least cost, because we don't want to raise taxes on our people that live in, on the residents of our cities and counties and whatnot, and the citizens of the United States. So yes, I get that. That's why we do budgets. And there's a lot of stuff that's based upon this. But why are we having budget problems now, Joe?
Corona.
Absolutely. Oh my gosh. It's funny because we take a look at different ways of bringing money into the local government, right? And what's the number one way of doing it?
Tell me.
Sales tax.
Sales tax, yes.
Sales tax. So I don't know if you guys noticed or not, but Anaheim, tourism is down. So there's Disneyland is closed. So all those hotels are pretty much empty. I'm sure they're not completely empty, but all that bed tax and stuff that went to your local city is down. The malls are closed. Like South Coast Plaza just announced the other day that they're opening up again, and so they're closed. So it's mostly online purchases right now. So with the online purchases, you get state sales tax taken out, but not local, right?
Right.
So the tax revenue is completely down, and so this is causing some serious budget issues. But at the same time, Joe, it's kind of odd that there are cities that are looking at increasing the salaries for some key people. Why is that?
Competition, just they want the best, and there's only so many few people that can solve these problems.
So during budget crisis, as they're laying people off, some people are getting pay raises.
Nice. I'm not one of those people, by the way.
That's what I love. That's what I love about this stuff. But what's interesting is that they being the Santa Ana specifically. Let's talk about Santa Ana for a second. Santa Ana posed to relax affordable housing obligations Joe, wait a second. It's time for political whip around.
Political whip around, yes.
There we go. Political whip around. So Santa Ana poses to relax affordable housing obligations on developers.
The proposed Board of Supervisors budget calls for cutting $50 million from what departments?
And 320-acre parcel adjacent to Chino Hills State Park has been preserved.
Moorlach. California must do more to help the long-term mentally ill.
So getting back in
Santa Ana, right? Yeah.
Santa Ana.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. As we get back into the discussion of the exciting things of economics and budget, right? Those are super riveting conversation pieces that we have going on here today. But like we said, Ron Lavelle, jazz hands, woo! So we're doing jazz hands today to make them a little bit more interesting for you all. So the Santa Ana, during the budget crisis, during COVID crisis, during housing crisis, during anything else, we could add crises too, has opted to slow down or to reduce the requirements for affordable housing for new developers. And why is this why are we talking about this on budget? Because when you look at what's going on, it could bring in more money to the city, because if they're able to freely build, they could actually sell homes for more money. But now we have the other issue. How does that help? Which kind of goes along with our last story a little bit. How do we help with the housing crisis for low income when we do that? What do you think, Joe?
I think the city is smart. There's a lot of gentrification going on in Santa Ana, and there's a lot of dilapidated buildings out there that can be reconstructed and refurbished. And even I think a percentage would have to go to low income housing.
And that's the thing, is they're cutting that, right? So they have done, in lieu of fee for $15 per habitable square foot, they cut it down to $5 per habitable square foot.
Mm.
Is that going to help or hurt the low income housing movement?
I don't think it's going to make it that much easier for them.
So, I mean, and I know this wasn't the original intent of this conversation, but you brought up gentrification, which is kind of interesting because, I mean, it's been a swear word lately amongst people. The idea of taking neighborhoods that are in need, that are inexpensive, and you have young professionals that are able to afford those, buying them, fixing those homes up, which is increasing the property value, which is making people sell more. And so some of the renters are being pushed out. So a neighborhood that's historically Black, for instance, like say, or Hispanic, right? Say like Echo Park or whatever, has been transformed into, not even on the racial side of it, but more on the economic side of it, has been transformed into a place for yuppies, right? Or millennials. I don't know what we call them anymore. For where they're young urban professionals making money, making the increase in stuff going on. And so much so that in other parts of the country, there are protests being held against the people who have gentrified the neighborhood, by getting up early o'clock in the morning, like 3 o'clock in the morning, pounding drums, flashing flashlights into the windows and yelling and screaming, waking people up, saying, if you live in this neighborhood, you are wrong and you need to move out now and give it back to the minorities. I mean, is that going to happen in Santa Ana, you think?
No, it's a quiet little town.
For now.
I mean, it's slowly changing. I mean, the gentrification is obvious in outlying the downtown area. The downtown area itself, with the high rises and the reconditioning of some of these old dilapidated buildings, it's impressive. This town is alive again.
Yeah, I mean, so going back to the question, now that's going to actually bring more income into the community. I mean, like, again, I ask the question, is this a good thing or a bad thing? Because it says the city of Santa Ana is a renter majority city. And despite the city's progress towards meeting its state housing goals for every low income housing, there continues to be a great need for housing as affordable for its residents. And this is from Ruben Barretos, from the SABHC director. And the letter adds, the current pandemic has increased the economic and housing pressure for low-income families in Santa Ana. And as incomes are decreasing and jobs are being lost, many low-income families struggle to remain housed. So the argument here is that this reduction in the price per square foot for new construction is going to put pressure on the people who are at risk, and now we're going to have a increase in homeless families, that is, in the community. Do you see that playing out that way, or are you in favor of more gentrification into the city center?
I think you can't stop progress. I think it's moving in that direction. They're even doing some infrastructure improvements. They're putting in a trolley. They're trying to really up their game here at Santa Ana. They've widened streets, like so it has to catch up with what they're doing. So I don't see a problem with it.
All right. Well, I think that's going to play into our last story. So, not the last story, but to the story, the last one with Senator Moorlach with California must do more with the mentally ill. Do you want to go to that, or do you want to go back to the budget calls?
Let's go back to the budget call.
Okay, cool.
So jazz hands with budgets. Yeah.
Budget.
All right. So Orange County officials have released their new budget plan to fill in a massive financial goal from the pandemic. Hello, surprise. Cutting $50 million from what departments say is needed to continue their existing services. Now, county officials released their recommended budget last week ahead of their September 1 budget hearing, which is what? Tomorrow. Yes.
It is tomorrow.
Yes.
Wow.
Different departments are being affected in many different ways, though they're claiming that there's going to be no layoffs, which is great news. If you go to County of Los Angeles, they're contemplating thousands of layoffs with their sheriff's department and multiple departments pitching in. Now, the sheriff's department and the district attorney's office have seen the largest cost escalations in recent years. They're getting a $34 million bill less than those departments that say it needs to keep providing their current levels. Now, county officials anticipate losing more than, check this out, $145 million in revenue this financial year, mainly from plummeting sales tax, as in-person sales shopping taking a hit during the pandemic, which you were saying about South Coast Plaza. Hopefully it'll open soon.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the social service agency and the sheriffs face the largest to their revenue stream, since they are largely based on sales tax. They've been helped in part recently by $43 million in savings from a new program and this is great news, right? Incentivizes hundreds of county employees to retire early or leave their jobs. Ooh, that sounds like fun.
The early retirement though works in many different ways, but then the only difference is that means they're not going to hire back, right? Because normally what happens when we do early retirement is they don't hire those positions back, and or if they do hire positions back, they cut the wages on that particular position and other benefits and things like this. And so, say you have somebody who is at 2.5%, which is kind of the standard for their 2% for their retirement, they cut that down to say 2%, right? And then instead of bringing the person in who's making say $100,000 a year, they bring them in making $60,000 a year. So you have a savings on both your the entry level money and also the retirement side and benefits cuts. So it's a big savings when you have somebody retire early. I just want to point that out, that early retirement is good for both the budget and both the person who's retiring early.
Well, I hope I get the same offer someday. And the proposed budget calls for $6.5 million in reserves this fiscal year, which is not a lot. $10 million in cuts. Sheriff Barnes has already made the entirety of cuts for the sheriff's department. And Barnes has said that the savings came from a shrinking number of commander positions. And check this out, eliminating sheriff positions at federal task forces on terrorism and child exploitation. This odd, just terrorism and child exploitation. That's where you're going to make the cuts. Interesting.
Well, I mean, here's the thing, and going back to that again, is that when you start having the defund ideas, right? Just kind of put this in the back of your mind here, that what you end up doing is you have to go back to what they call core capabilities or core mission, right? So what is the core mission of the Orange County Sheriff's Department? The core mission of Orange County Sheriff's Department is jails, right? It's part of the charter, and doing patrol and law enforcement in the unincorporated areas. So at the end of the day, everything has to go towards those two missions, right? Everything outside of that, whether it's a SWAT team, whether it's those other task force that are on there, and again, it's not saying that those things aren't being done, right? Because those are federal task force, which means it's a bunch of different police departments put people into it. What it is that the sheriff's department is saying, hey, we're not going to add personnel to that from our department. Not saying that things aren't being shared. So again, and when you look at budget times, you cut back down to your core functions. And so like we've done this in EMS, right? Where you take a look at what are we doing outside. So community programs, for instance, right? Joe was very popular with he did community programs. And so you take a look at community programs, you take a look at those things. And when you start having budget issues, those are the things that get chopped, right? So you can do your core mission of running ambulances, right? Or running fire trucks, right? And so yeah, and that's those are the things that get cut back out to do your core, whatever your core functions are for your divisions.
So last year, county officials previously estimated that their financial losses was at over $200 million this fiscal year from sales tax alone. And in the last year, which ended in June 30th, the county drew $30 million of its more than $500 million in budget reserves. Wow, they have $500 million in budget reserves. The county plans on using about $453 million of their federal CARES Act stimulus money to cover new county expenses related to the corona response, but that money cannot be used for revenue losses. Amid the pandemic, county officials have pushed back their annual budget process by 3 months, and instead of passing a large status quo holdover budget that took effect July 1st, the official start of the new fiscal year. The annual budget hearing pushed to September 1st with a final approval scheduled for September 15th. So that's the budget update for 2020, 21 to 22, right?
Ooh, jazz hands. Gosh, jazz hands. Oh, okay. Man, I tell you something. I mean, if you want to get nitty gritty into politics, everybody, budgetary issues are not sexy by any means, right? I mean, like these aren't the things that make headlines, and but that is where things happen. But if you take a look at when we've had issues in the past, right? Huge political stories, Enron, for instance, things like this. You know where they even Al Capone, right? Go all the way back to Al Capone. Where did they nab these guys? In accounting, right? In accounting. And I am not an accounting guy. I hate numbers, but I understand. I just say hate numbers.
Cooper was a wanted man.
I don't have a necessarily an emotion to a number, but yeah, I'm not one who wants to count things all the time. So yeah, but it is those people who do the budgets, it is definitely the where it is. And you're absolutely, everybody complains about overspending and government, doing things with their money. But when it comes to budget meetings, no one shows up to those. No one comments on those. No one takes a look at those. I shouldn't say no one. Very few people take a look as residents, take a look at where the money's going. And that's when you run into things like Bell, right? Where you have people stealing money from the coffers.
Yeah.
Right. Without any kind of oversight,
Crazy.
As we're both coughing and drinking. Oh man. So yeah. Guess what, Joe?
What's up? What's going on?
Speaking of budgets, there is this really I'm actually excited about this. So I don't know if you noticed this or not, but going back to the home buildings and all this kind of stuff, I think you see a lot of overbuilding going on, right? And the Orange County is beautiful, and I know producer Brian in there, he loves to hike. Him and his wife like to get out and do that and bike ride and stuff like this. Do you like to do the outdoor stuff, Joe?
With the pandemic, I've been kind of indoors binge watching, not a lot of exercising.
Well, I don't know if you looked behind your house though, over to the hills. There's some beautiful hills over here, and then I live really close to the Chino State Park, and it's literally like 3 miles away from my house, and I love it, right? And people go over there and they run, they do all sort of stuff, but the hills behind my house are at risk of being built out, and but someone a group of people got together and they bought 320 parcels into the city of Chino Hills along the eastern edge of the 14,000 acre San Bernardino, Orange County, Riverside counties, and it was bought by the Mountain Recreation and Conservatory Authority late Wednesday, and it's exciting, right? It's really exciting. Now they're not long able to build homes up there, so we're gonna have some open space for our kids to be able to enjoy, for us to be able to enjoy, and I really think that more of this needs to be done. And this is take this out for a second. I'm not sure if the right move right now is for government to go and purchase this land because it's a huge expense. And we just talked about the budget. We're cutting budgets and all this kind of stuff. But private organizations like this conservancy, even if they're not 501c3s or even if they're JPAs, things like this that are separate from tax, I think this is where we should be concentrating that, because to run this land at the end of the day gets kind of expensive, but having private individuals going through and purchasing these parks, not the state parks, not purchasing state parks, don't get me wrong, but purchasing property adjacent to these parks, which will stop building into these things and leaving the open space for us to enjoy, I think is exciting. And again, it's cost effective. Brian, I know you're listening and normally you don't pop on, but I'd like to hear your take on that.
I love it. Tired of all the building.
Yeah.
I mean, if you look towards the a lot of the land that Irvine Ranch Conservancy manages, to the right hand side, it's just scarred because of building right now. And it'll be cool when it's done, I guess, for the people who live there, but I'm a nature guy. I don't like concrete.
Yeah, me either. I bought my house where I bought it because behind me, my house there's nothing but this beautiful hillside, and it's just great. And I am being a NIMBY, and I'm a proud NIMBY at this point, you know. And I heard that they want to build homes behind there, and I'm really hoping that this conservancy group or somebody like it will come and purchase it from the oil company, and not build back there, because it's gorgeous. I mean, you know, I'm not a big fan of coyotes because they killed my dog, but you know, they do what they do, and they're up there running around. There's cows that run up there. We have deer that run behind our house. It's, you know, you sit outside and you drink a cup of coffee and you feel like you're in nature a little bit. You're not stuck in this jungle of the concrete jungle, if you will. And yeah, you know, so I'm all for it. Good job, Conservancy Group. And Bob the Builder, I'm not sure what that means, but I think she meant to say ban the building. But thank you, Lupe, for that comment.
Maybe Bob the Builder's the cartoon reference.
I think originally said bun the building, BUN. I think she meant
burn the building.
Burn.
No.
Did you want to say burn the building there, Miss Arredondo, or did you want to ban the building? It's awesome though. Appreciate the comments though. It's good stuff. And I'm just happy. And again, it's an economic way to be able to do this. If you are really into nature, if you are really into the idea of preserving land, right? These are great ways of doing it. Get involved in these organizations, and let's do it. Let's move from a feel-good story and let's talk about mental illness.
Yeah, let's do that. You know,
wait. I'm interrupting you. I'm interrupting you on purpose.
Okay, go ahead.
There's been studies being done that more people that get out into the wilderness and do hiking and get away from the stuff actually have more clarity, and it helps with mental illness. So
Amen.
I agree. I mean, you take an autistic kid and you throw him in the forest, he acts normal a little bit. They
don't
say
just I would just throw 'em.
the last child left in the woods. Great book. It talks about that whole philosophy. So yeah, going to a good mental health. The state auditor, they couldn't be more timely. They just did a report called "California has not ensured the individuals with serious mental health illnesses receiving adequate ongoing care." Now, this is from the Latterman Pederis Short Act. Have you ever heard of that before? I hadn't even heard of that before.
No.
It was back in 1967. It's LPS for short. It was signed into law by Governor then Ronald Reagan, and the LPS Act is in desperate need of reform. And a number of homeless individuals on our streets with severe mental illness should be enough evidence for something, because if something is off kilter. John Moorlach, a state senator, has kind of taken it on as his personal fight. In February, the state address, even Gavin Newsom called reforms from the LPS Act, which Moorlach commended. He was responding to a homeless crisis largely caused by mental illness, a crisis that is ongoing to get worse if some form of involuntary holds are not pursued. So the state audit affirmed that more must be done with the LPS Act to assist those with long-term assistance outpatient treatment. Now, they looked at inadequate long-term care. Individuals exhibiting involuntary holds have not been enrolled consistently in subsequent care to help them live safely in their communities. In communities, no more than 9 in 2 counties, no more than 9% of these individuals were connected to ongoing care. Only 19 of the state's 59 counties have adopted assisted outreach treatment, even though it's an effective community-based approach to mental health treatment to help prevent future involuntary holds and conservatorships. So it's recommended that mental health reporting requirements should be overhauled to capture comprehensive spending information as well as outcomes for programs. Now, there were five reform bills, 5 Senate bills, and there's 2 reasons why they were kicked away. And I'll give you the first one, Todd. It was because of Corona. All those coronavirus related bills kind of took precedent. So these bills kind of took a back seat. But also, there was a second reason why, and it's the current, it was over civil rights, which forces demanding the severely mentally ill individual on our streets to be left there because of involuntary hold is inhumane. And Moorlach argues that to leave them on the street unmedicated and untreated is inhumane. So what do you think about that?
So he's saying, let me ask the question because I missed that part. So he's saying that leaving people on the street is inhumane, or is the better choice?
He argues that leaving them on the streets unmedicated and untreated is inhumane.
You know, I when I was working EMS, we dealt with a lot of people who were unmedicated. The majority of the people who we end up transporting for different reasons, a lot of them were schizophrenic, various different reasons, but it was a loop, right? It was this loop. We would take them to the hospital, they would get them cleaned up, and then they'd be back on the street. And you get to know these guys, regular people. Like these are the guys who you deal with. I mean, like we had this one young lady who was schizophrenic and ran on her multiple times, and she didn't really like us because we'd snack her, grab her off the street and then bring her to the hospital, and she didn't like going to the hospital. So, but learn to dealing with her issues, getting to know her well, and we're able to kind of de-escalate some of the issues that she was having. And I think that having more mental health workers now, I was not a mental health worker by any means, right? I had some minimal training that we had as medics. But kind of understanding that process and kind of walk her through some stuff. People would call on her because they were frightened by her actions. She would argue with herself, right? Or the perceived person she saw in her head, or the voices that she was hearing. And so yeah, I get why people would call, but then the worst part about it with her specifically, this one case, is that she would, after she would come out of the hospital, she'd be clean. I mean, physically clean, like washed, but to come to the point to where she got really filthy because she didn't take care of herself, And I struggle with the idea that I don't think that she wants to be, stuck in a hospital. She liked to walk around and do her things and drink her coffee, and that was her kick was coffee. I don't recall if she did any street drugs or if she self-medicated outside of caffeine. But the point is that, do we pluck her off the street? And interestingly enough, the ACLU sued both the state of California and the state of New York in the 1970s, and Florida too, I'm sorry, and went through multiple lawsuits and stuff like this. And it really started in 1972 on behalf of 5,400 residents in the Willowbrook State School for the Mentally Disabled in Staten Island. And they got to the point to where they were able to get that school closed down and to release. And they were in terrible, 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 terrible conditions. And if you remember the movie One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, that was actually a protest movie about the mental health system. So kind of go through this, right? I mean, but back to the Willowbrook case. And actually, this is the case that really kind of made Geraldo Rivera kind of famous. Anyway, they exposed naked children lying on the floor, many of them in their own filth, and so, was that a humane situation for them? So in 1975, these reforms came through. Excuse me, I got a cough. Sorry about that. These reforms came through, and it basically in 1980, the Civil Rights for Institutionalized Person Act came into play, which said that the only way that you're going to keep people involuntarily committed is, and this is by the Supreme Court, basically said, states cannot confine non-dangerous individuals who can survive on his or her own with the help of family and friends. And I think that's the key, is that can we have friends and family help these individuals out? Now, we also need, if we're going to do this, we also need to give the friends and family that are helping these people out the resources to do so. Because right now, I think a lot of it happens is that whether it's through nonprofit organizations, whether it's through a combination between taxpayers and nonprofit organizations, what can we do to help these individuals out? I know that in Orange County, we had a situation where a mentally ill person was killed in interaction with law enforcement, and it kind of put light to his situation. And his family said they tried to help him, but he refused to stay in the house. He felt uncomfortable being in the house. When they brought him home, he would sleep in the backyard, sleep in the bushes in the backyard, sleep on the ground, things like this. And so he refused to take his medication for various different reasons. And so eventually he ended up back up on the streets, and he ended up getting in a situation where law enforcement killed him. This happens a lot. We see a lot of the interactions between law enforcement and the mentally ill. What can we do to stop this and to stop? Do we, and maybe we do put more effort into social services when it comes to the mentally ill, or train law enforcement officers better. Things. I mean, there's a lot of stuff we can walk through, but again, this is a long answer to a short question. Is I don't know if it's better. Let me rephrase that. I know it isn't. I don't think it's better to take people who are mentally ill and just put them away for no particular reason, to lock them up, right? We need services for them. We need training for them. We need, not for training necessary, training to take care of them, but they're going to be with us. And mentally ill people have been with us since the beginning of time, whether it's chemical imbalances and things like this. But putting them into jail or putting them into mental institutions, I don't think is the correct answer. Number one, it's super expensive, right? And not, we're just talking about budget issues. So number one, it's super expensive. Number two, who wants to live a life like that, right? And then number three is, as long as they're not hurting anybody else or hurting themselves, and we can keep them away from doing that. If they're living on the street, I mean, it's not the ideal idea, but I don't know. That's kind of where it's at.
Well, you described situations that it bows to having those kinds of institutions, and the way we design them and the way we care for these people has to change. The audit focuses on long-term care, and we're failing at it. The repeat offenders, the violent people that that are in the street, that we're just throwing into jails, those are the people that need to be institutionalized. Is like, it seems like an old word, but it's taken to a proper hospital that can give him the long-term care. Yeah, it's expensive, but it's also expensive to have these people roam around freely. And some of them don't have mom and dad and brothers and sisters. They've burned all those bridges and they're all gone. And,
right.
and they're solo. They're all on their own. And it doesn't feel good.
So Brett, thanks for putting that up. So Brett says, depending on the state of individuals and what has caused the mental illness, some friends and family members have disassociated themselves at times. And you're absolutely right, Brett. That has happened. I have a friend of mine who went through some crisis, and people just abandoned him. And so that's absolutely not the right thing to do. And it's hard, and you're right, Joe. I mean, maybe it is more expensive. Or maybe it is better to make those expenses for those people. But I do, like Brett comes in here, like the idea of nonprofit. There are enough nonprofit organizations out there that do mental health care. And if we give it into the sense where there's not a profit, so that's one of the other issue. When people talk about the why do we put people on medication and why do we put them into hospitals? Well, on the private insurance side, there's a huge money making scheme, if you will, for that. But if we keep it into a nonprofit and keep the ability for people to sign them out, what I mean by that is that if, say, for instance, if Joe, we put this guy into the mental hospital because he's having some issues, and you have visitation rights and things like this, and you go there and you see that the care is not being taken care of the way they are. As a family member, you should have the ability to sign the person out without having to go through legal issues and stuff like this.
That's one of the SB 1254 authorizes certain persons to petition the court for appointment of guardian. So that's exactly what they're asking for. Mm-hmm. So these families have they're encouraged and they're protected, and they have something in their hands to help their family members. So you just struck one of the reasons Moorlach is pushing for some of these bills to empower local resources to make things happen better.
It might not be a bad idea, because I mean, like, one of the issues that we have now is what do we do with people? And Lupita, she says here, especially with mental health as a society, we haven't revisited nor put our attention on those needs. She says, quite frankly, people normally just look the other way. And you're absolutely right. And there are times too that when you have somebody who's having a mental break for whatever reason, the first thing people do is they call 911, and law enforcement rolls up, and then they take them away, and maybe they've committed some minor crimes. And then instead of dealing with the mental health break that they're going through, they put them into jail, into the county jail, which doesn't help them at all. puts them in a dangerous situation, and then perpetuate, and then they're not on medication necessarily, and it puts them through even more chances of being in violent encounters. And so if you take a look, there's been some studies done, or some stories done, I should say, where they take a look at how many in the county jails, how many mentally ill people are in the county jails just because they were having a mental break, and the legal system does not know what to do with them. Yes, did they commit a minor crime? That's what ended them there. So whether they stole something, whether they were doing some other things, that maybe some act of violence or something like this, that was perpetuated, like say a schizophrenic person hit somebody, that's what got them into the system. But they don't get their mental health needs taken care of. And again, putting people in jail, again, is a high expense, for them, not just for the county, through legal expenses, through keeping them inside there, the expense of guarding them, and then the fact that they're not getting their mental health taken care of is really is really important. So yeah, I mean, we need to do a way better job. Now here's the problem, right? The ACLU though is fighting expanding involuntary confinement. Right. They put an article out August 13, 2019, on this case here. And this was more along the lines of a, for lack of a better term, if you read the article, it's very anti-gun. But the issue was dealing with active violence and mental issues. And the idea was taking people who are violent tendencies and put them into the mental system. The ACLU say, no, that's not what we want to do. So now you have the counterbalance to it, where the ACLU is really fighting to keep people out from going into mental institutions. So Brett says there was a situation like that locally here 2 years ago, where it ended up in a shooting. And so, however, the officers were familiar with the individual, but he was known to refuse to take his medication. Yeah, it happens a lot, Brett. I mean, we've seen time and time again where you have people who are on a mental break and there are a lot of reasons behind it. I think a lot of times these people can't figure out reality compared to what isn't real, and in some cases it's fear.
They don't take their medication because they don't want to take their medication. They don't feel like they need their medication. They don't think it's necessary. They feel it's a matter of control, so they reject it as a principle in their mind.
Yeah, well, but like I was saying, Joe, sometimes though that leads to violent encounters, and then law enforcement tends to, react violently against violence. So we've seen a lot of people with mental health issues that have been killed by law enforcement over the years. So it's kind of a bummer way to end our conversation.
Well, hopefully next year when the Senate gets back together, there's something that's go to the top of the list.
Joe, you're absolutely correct. And mental health issues are something that we need to deal with as a society. What's the solution for this is something that we should be working together to figure it out, because at the end of the day, like we pointed out here, that in the jails is full of people with mental health issues that aren't being taken care of. That when they get released, they're no longer being treated. When we can't just start plucking people off the street and throwing them into institutions, there has to be a better way of being able to take care of them. And I think I understand what the senator's saying. That is it more humane to take? There's a guy we call him the blanket guy, because he always has a blanket with him. He's on the corner of down the street on Harbor and Imperial, and yeah, he hangs out there, and again, he goes through loops. He gets really filthy, and he goes away, and he comes back. He looks clean, nice haircut, and then he goes through the system. And I'm sure his family is not sure what to do with him, but I don't think having him in that revolving door does anything good for him. And I really, what is the answer? I think it's a lot of work that has to be done to this, and this is something that, as a society, we can't just turn a blind eye to. And Phil Collins wrote that song a long time ago, "Man on the Corner," and I think that's something that you should take a listen to it and think about. Should we turn a blind eye to the man on the corner? And I just really hope that everybody can kind of go out at some point and maybe we can answer this, or maybe the next generation coming up behind us is sick of it. Brett says it's kind of odd that the initial form of mental health was to take them out of prisons. Yeah, you're right. It is. It's a weird. You take them out of the mental hospitals, right, and then put them back in, but then they go back into into prisons again. You're absolutely right. All right, Joe. On that note, what do you got coming up this week? Anything exciting?
More schoolwork.
Oh yeah, school.
Yeah, more schoolwork.
School.
But I'm done. I'm done. I got one more week.
One more week, and then you're done.
I'm going one time.
Awesome. Well, congratulations on
thank you, Brad. Thank you.
That. Yeah. So, well, with us here, at Sitch Radio, we got a lot of exciting stuff going on. Thursdays and Fridays, don't forget to check out the Drive Time OC, right? The great show. Producer Brian and Seth Johnson are on that show talking about some great stuff. Brian, what do you got coming up on Drive Time OC on Thursday? Anything exciting?
We're going to be talking about the reopening going on here in Orange County. Some of our malls and strip malls are going to be reopening, which is cool. We always cover weekend events, which is nice because more and more things are popping off to entertain all of us residents here in the OC.
Awesome. And it's a great show. It's a lot of fun to listen to. I listen to it. So if I listen to it, you should listen to it, Joe. That's just the rules here. We'll lay down some rules, everybody out there. And yeah. So, and then of course, tomorrow we, on my show, have Business Continuity Today coming up, and we're going to talk a little bit about, resiliency in business and with this COVID stuff going on, what that means. And yeah, so that's the exciting stuff that's happening here. Don't forget about the
budget meeting. Don't forget about the big budget meeting. Tomorrow. The big budget meeting tomorrow.
Budget meeting tomorrow. You should go to it. Exciting stuff.
Really want to swing it low.
Don't forget to wear your mask when you go to the budget meeting to keep yourself at your 6 feet distance. And yeah, it's exciting stuff. Hey everybody, I want to thank you all for being here with us this morning. It's such a pleasure to have you part of our morning and starting our week off. I want to thank my co-host Joe, producer Brian from Sitch Radio, and don't forget to follow us on your favorite podcast player, Facebook, YouTube, and remember, get involved. Hold your elected officials accountable and vote local. And until next week, stay safe and stay aware.